I hold this event every year because one thing you didn't hear in my biography, but those that know me know this, my parents are both educators. I have a couple of brothers that were educators, 3 in-laws. You know, we always talked education policy. I was planning to be a teacher. I got lost along the way, and here I am as a legislator. You know, what can I say? But I'm still involved in education policy because it's become my passion. It's such an important deal, measured in so many different ways. If I was to ask you your top 5 issues, education, even if you weren't educators, would be in the top 2, most likely. Because of the state, it's typically public safety and education, not always in that order. But if you look at it in a different way, we spend over half of our general fund budget on education. So by definition, it's our highest priority. If I asked you to open up your checkbook, I would find out what your priorities are by where you're writing your money. It's the same thing with the state, although we get a little confused at times, but nevertheless, it's a big chunk of money. California often sees itself as leading the nation, certainly the largest state, the largest ag state. We're 12% of the population of the United States. It's often said, as goes California, so goes the nation. Well, my goodness, those of us who live here hope they don't follow us on everything that we do, right? We're losing credibility when it comes to education because we have to do better. If we're going to continue to be at the forefront of not just the United States but the nation, we have to get our schools to perform better than the bottom 5 to 10% as they are now. We can't lead the nation if we can't turn our educational system around. And those students who do make it to college, we heard from a previous speaker, often don't have the skills necessary to even be doing at the community college level. We have a lot of remedial work done. And then when we get them out of college, even from our finest institutions, we find half of them are either underemployed or unemployed now just because of our inability to keep jobs to the level that we're putting people out. But likewise, employers tell me they're not finding the kind of qualified employees they need. And we had a previous conference where we talked about what is it that we're trying to do with school, and collaboration and a lot of other things go into that. But certainly employers like the ability for people to think critically, to be able to collaborate with other workers, to be teachable and trainable so that you're not going to learn specifically what one particular industry is going to be needing, but as long as you're teachable and you can work with other people, you're going to have skill sets that will allow you to succeed. We can certainly do better than we're doing. And many in Sacramento disagree on how to make education better, but we can't let our kids down just because the adults can't agree. That's why I've reached across the aisle to reform our education system in a way that puts students above all else. Bipartisan education reforms to offer parents and students more educational options, to reform our quality-blind approach to teaching, and to even empower parents to make real governance changes in their local schools. I want to parenthetically add that there are times as a member of the minority party, indeed I'm the leader of the minority party in the Senate, I get frustrated because I don't get as many things done up there as I would like. But yesterday when I was in committee on one of my education bills, I had 2 parents that were taking advantage of the Parent Empowerment Act that Senator Gloria Romero and I joint authored a couple of years ago. They turned around their school, and lo and behold, they ended up at the end of the day making an agreement with LA Unified for them to be the best provider to come in and turn around the school that they had already failed them in. But the point is, they circulated the petitions. They got 51% was what's required of signatures from other parents that wanted to make a difference. We always say you got to get parents back involved in lives. They did it. I got kind of emotional just thinking about all the work they had to do, but we gave them the tools to do it, and their kids will benefit because of that. So those little victories take us a little bit further and help me keep plowing ahead. I was a farm kid, that's why I use farm metaphors occasionally, plowing being one of those. Today we're hearing about individuals who've been doing great things to ensure students can achieve success in the area of college and career readiness, and I hope we can learn from their example. You know, I look forward to what our speakers are going to say. So, our next speaker is Marshall Tuck. He's doing amazing work for students in Los Angeles for some of the most disadvantaged populations in the state. Through his leadership with the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, he's giving not just hope, but real opportunities to students in high poverty, high-risk areas like Watts and downtown Los Angeles.
The question of, are we preparing our young people for college and careers? We know the answer today is we're not doing it at scale. You know, Dr. Vurdien mentioned 70% of the incoming students need remediation in math and English. There was a study just came out a couple days ago from Harvard, looked at LA Unified. The ninth graders coming into LA Unified in 2008, 2009, tracked them over their 4 years, just released a report that 11-12 graduation rates, only 18% of that entering ninth grade class graduated passing A through G curriculum with a C or better. I think most people probably know here A through G is what's required to get into a Cal State or a UC in our state of California. And I think of that as not just the floor for college, but also the floor for career. Because when you break down the A through G, we're not asking people to take advanced calculus. You're talking about 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, 2 years of social science, 2 years of foreign language, 1 year of visual performing arts, and 1 year of a college prep elective. And I think that's a base education level that we want for all citizens in our city, in our state, and in our country. And so that to me is a strong floor in terms of A through G. You can make the argument Algebra 2 is one of the A through G requirements. I think there's a legitimate policy question about, hey, is that an essential piece of the equation or not? But beyond that, it's really clear that the floor for college and career readiness is A through G. And again, 18% of the kids that graduated last June in the largest school system in our state, the second largest school system in this country, graduated college and career ready. So the conversation we're all having today is what does it take? What should we focus on as a collective group of educators, of practitioners, of policymakers, of civic leaders to improve the rate of college and career readiness? And I think the hard part in education is there's so many things that we all want to do, and everything helps kids, so the focus can get lost at times on the most important things to do. And I think at the core of college and career prepared for all students starts with quality school leadership. Secondly, for us, effective teaching. Schools, for all of us that work in them or the civic leaders who know about them, they're very complicated because we've got politics and we've got different neighborhoods and we've got different governing structures and we've got a bunch of rules and bureaucracy and we've got a 2,000-page ed code. It's chaos, right? But at the same time, they're quite simple. Kids are in class 85% of the time they're at a school site. 25% of the time, a person is awake from age 5 to age 18, they're in a classroom. Like you can run the math. Like literally of the awake hours of youth in a 7-hour school day, 25% of their life from 5 to 18, assuming they're sleeping 10 to 11 hours a night in a classroom. So if teaching is not improving, student achievement will not accelerate. Right? If it's not actually improving, you're not going to get from today of 70% of the kids coming to Fullerton College needing remediation to 40%, 30%, 20%, 0%, which is where we should be. They should be focused on secondary education, post-secondary. We should be focused K-12 on making sure when they finish in the 12th grade, they're ready to come here so they can go to advanced learning in terms of post-secondary. So if you can improve the quality of teaching in the classroom, then you're going to improve the pace of instruction, of student achievement. And when we think about that in our schools, and it's obviously much easier said than done. It's quite difficult to do, especially in environments when there's low funding, when you're just getting teachers getting pounded all the time in the media. It's just the sector, again, many folks longer than I've been in it for 11 years now. And there's just so much noise that can be exhausting for those who are doing the work every day. And we got to clear that noise out and get focused on the fundamentals, which are how do we make sure that schools are able to attract and hire people to come teach at their schools? How do we make sure that as the baby boomers are retiring, our state right now, we're already short special ed, math, and science teachers today. 5 years, baby boomers are going to retire in major numbers. We're going to be short English, social science, and language teachers tomorrow. How to make sure young people want to come into this profession, get excited to come be teachers, get inspired like a lot of our current grade teachers are to come into the profession. And then two, once we have more people coming in at the partnership, what do? We try to make sure we can recruit them to schools to get excited, develop them. Two pieces of it. First and foremost, if your principal's not a good instructional leader, you're not going to develop your teachers as fast as possible. Every single principal in our network of our schools, you could be a 5-year veteran, a 10-year veteran, a 1-year veteran. You got to go through a certification course to prove you're a strong instructional leader. 40 hours of PD minimum. You got to take a test, focus on are you able to observe instruction well, and give good feedback on what you saw. If you do that, then you get certified. You don't have to come back. If you don't, you're coming back until you're able to do that. So principals have got to be instructional leaders. But that's not enough. We invest heavily in creating a cadre. We believe you have to have a cadre of teacher leaders at every school site that should be the anchor of teacher development. Who are the teachers who have proven results with their young people, who are respected by their peers, that can be created as a group of teacher leaders to work side by side with teachers on developing their peers on their school site. So it's not just Marshall Tuck's guy in a suit saying, hey, come to our centralized training. It's got to live at a school site. It's got to live with the educators that are there. And so we invest a lot. We're able to raise some money. Part of our model is we try to raise money from the outside for the nonprofit to supplement the public dollars that go through. And part of that's for more time for teaching, training. You know, if you think about the conversation now, it's challenging because we're saying, hey, you got to get better and better. You know, we got to do more and more in terms of improving student achievement and in terms of improvement on state tests. I'm a big believer that state tests are necessary. I think you got to measure what you're trying to accomplish. At the same time, we can't expect student achievement to get much better without helping teachers get better, and you can't get better at teaching without some time to get better. You know, think about like of the NBA, if like you just played games, you never got to practice. You like game after game after game after game, and you never got to practice. You just won't get that much better because you'd actually make the same mistakes over and over. So we invest a lot in actually giving teachers more time and making sure our teacher leaders are the ones that are supporting that time. Third key area of focus for us in terms of how do you improve schools, which is the anchor of college career readiness, is targeted student supports. That starts with giving kids the right classes. Jordan High School was the lowest performing high school in all of LA Unified 2009-10. 2010-11. We took it over in 11-12. And I talked to some of the young people. There was a girl who I spoke with who said, I got placed in chemistry B and never took chemistry A. We literally had dozens of kids who were seniors who had never taken U.S. history and there was no path for them to get put into U.S. history. I mean, it was insane. So there's just no way you can even consider a kid. We're talking about college and career ready. If you're not giving the young people the courses they need, it's over. Like there's no starting point for them on college and career ready. They're not going to get there. And this is what's happening. I mean, on a significant level at our school. Santee High School, when we took this thing over in 08-09 was our first year. They had a bunch of students who were seniors who were going home at noon. And I looked at our grade. We literally had a school that was at 2% grade level in math. And kids are going home at noon. I was like, what's going on here? Why are they going home? And they got assigned to home because they had technically finished their courses for graduation, but a bunch of them had D's in math, F's in geometry, algebra 1, and we're taking kind of general math, and we were sending them home at noon. I mean, it was absolutely insane. So we've got to figure out a way to adjust the master schedule so we give kids the courses they need and not just give you a course. I can't just give you algebra and say I'm done on college ready. If you fail algebra, I got to give you algebra again. But not necessarily with the same teacher in the same situation, because doing the same thing over and over doesn't actually help you. How do you create more time and more supports for kids that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grade levels behind, which unfortunately you find in our schools. We got students who are English language learners who have been designated EL for 10 years. And yet we already know that if you're not redesignated within 3 years, the likelihood of you actually graduating high school is 10%. So you got to change the schedule so more kids get more time in the subjects that they need. And then we complement that with technology. We've invested heavily in technology. We're very early. I think this whole space, this whole sector, we're early in technology, but it is definitely a facilitator, and it can be a key accelerator if it's integrated. Technology alone doesn't get the job done. You know, we believe that technology is a tool for teachers and educators to help kids and a tool for kids to engage in their learning. So we've invested a lot in what's called, blended learning. It's a broad term. It's used a lot in the sector. For us, that's defined as bringing technology into the classrooms, not increasing classroom size. It allows teachers to actually break their classroom into smaller sizes, so you can actually have a teacher working with a small group of students, maybe a group of students working on computers on their own, working as groups, and how do you really leverage it? What we see the value of technology is students enjoy it, they're really engaged. It gives teachers significant data, which allows them to create better lesson plans, which at the core of it is what schools are all about.
As a managing partner of Spectrum Knowledge, our next speaker, Dr. Pham, works with dozens of organizations, including Fortune 500, public offices, and nonprofit agencies to boost employee performance and strategic effectiveness.
What is heroic leadership? We need to get away from just a traditional model. We need to have CEOs. We still need to have presidents of organizations. We still need positional leaders. That's heroic leadership, is idolizing that leader only, though. We need to think about collaborative leadership. How do we engage these populations like women, Asians, Latinos, LGBT, whatever it is, who normally do not speak out, don't have voice? Because you know what? That same leader that is a hero today, and then his or her successor, and I'll say his actually typically, right? Successor, well, they're going to do the same thing. And his successor afterwards going to do the same thing. And you know what we're going to have? we're going to drop from #1 GDP to #2 in 2016 into the Chinese, right? Because we are not diversifying, pure and simple. So we need collaborative leadership. Even if the CEO is still a white male, we need to have him have advisors who don't look like him, don't talk like him, act like him, or else we're going to lose not here in the US, we're going to lose the international race, which is STEM, everything else that we've talked about. So hopefully you'll take away the message, which is diversity first, inclusion, then innovation. It's pretty hard to have it without innovation, without the first two. So I'm looking forward to joining the discussion, and thanks so much for having me.
First question. I'll try to read this thing. Dr. Vurdien mentioned community college students being pushed to increase math and English readiness, but how much of a priority is teaching a second language? In an aggressive job market, a second language is now a boon to employers. How do you feel about this?
I'll give you a very simple bottom line answer. Whether you work for the US government selling goods to foreign governments, or you're the private sector employee selling to a foreign company, if you don't speak the language, don't have the culture, they're not going to buy from you. And guess what? You don't sell anything, which our exports have decreased over time. Our country gets poorer, our education system gets worse, and it's a vicious cycle and a downward spiral.
Next question. Are there models in other countries that do a good job, it says other countries or states, that do a good job of preparing their citizens for career in college?
The U.S. has been dropping every year internationally. I think most recently, compared to larger industrialized countries, we were, I think, 17th in reading, 23rd science, I think 29th in math. So we've been decreasing. If you look at the countries at the top, typically South Korea, Finland, obviously very different demographics than we have, but you'll see just like unique pieces of their strategy. So Finland, for example, they spent about 20 years just completely re-emphasizing the teaching profession, invested a ton nationally. You get paid, the differential of pay between a teacher, a lawyer, and an engineer in Finland, South Korea is actually extremely tight. You can make almost as much as a teacher as you can in those other professions.
But let's look at even the poorest countries, right? Vietnam and parts of China. So what they have is a lot of after-school programs, right, where parents are actually encouraged to spend. But at the same time, what it is they are doing what we're now, the trend is calling it the flipped classroom. They've been doing that, not in the classroom at all times, but afterwards. It's practice, practice, practice. It's boring. There's nothing exciting about it. A lot of it is rote repetition. And I'm not saying, because I'm preaching innovation as well, but you need to have that kind of discipline, structure, and repetition that I think we've been experimenting with our kids too much in California. And look what's happened. Now we're moving back toward a lot of structure, and we maybe overcorrected, maybe too many standards, too many metrics and all that. But it's not necessarily metrics, but it's got to be that base repetition. And this is what Marshall talked about. You can't forget the basics. You can talk innovation all you want, but if you don't have the basics, it's just not going to happen. So they focus on core, right? And we're trying to focus too hard on innovation first.
Here's something else that's kind of related, and there's two different questions, so I'll read them and then we'll wade through it. I'll let you guys respond, and then by the way, I was not planning on answering. I'm like the moderator. That puts me in a safe position, okay? But this one particularly calls me out, so I'll be happy to answer it. This Marshall talked a lot about the lack of adequate funding for public schools, and we were just talking about that, being able to afford a home in the area where you're teaching. What should be done about this? Would especially like to hear Senator Huff's response. Another, thank you very much. Who did that? Raise your hand. No, wait, go stand in the corner. Second question, how is it possible to properly fund schools that we are told are underfunded if we are already the highest tax state and at risk of losing those who already are in the upper tax brackets? Two very good questions, opposite sides of the same coin. Who wants to stab at it first?
There is a major inequality in the funding for higher education. We get funded around $4,500 per full-time equivalent student. That's what the community colleges get. The CSUs, for one full-time equivalent student, they will get close to about $8,000-9,000. And the UCs receive close to $14,000 per one full-time equivalent student. But if you look at the work that the community colleges do, the first 2 years, the 60 units that are required to earn the transfer degree to get to the CSU system are exactly the same courses that the CSUs offer. They are exactly the same courses that the UCs offer. We have faculty that are as qualified as the faculty of the CSUs and as qualified as the faculty of the UCs. Our faculty have a higher teaching load than the CSUs and the UCs. Our faculty teach 15 units, CSUs 12 units, and the UCs vary from 6 to 9 units. And yet, when it comes to the funding, you see the disparity.
In 2010, CEO Magazine cited California as number 50 out of 50 for business-friendly state, okay? We stink. Businesses don't want to come here. They're leaving, right? Northrop Grumman is now headquartered as of 2011 in Virginia. We lost Nissan recently, a couple years before that. It's a downward spiral. Small businesses are not opening here. Now, number one, Texas, right? And I'm not saying we follow their model either, right? Because they've got their flaws too. Texas is number one. California is number 50. Texas is the most business-friendly state. They have much better tax base, all that. So, you know, businesses create jobs, which give money and whatnot. And, you know, we do need better redistribution of wealth. We definitely do need, because Texas now, we're not going to call that a good distribution of wealth, right? They have pretty terrible distribution to their educational system. So they're creating more wealth in Texas. If you want to succeed in business, I haven't talked about it. I talk about it with colleagues all the time. You know, if I had to pick one state, I'd go to Texas or Virginia. That's where all the money is, right? I live in California. I love it here. I'm not leaving. So don't worry about that. But the thing is that's a reality. So it's a combination of being business unfriendly with poor wealth distribution. So Texas is almost swung the exact opposite way that we are. So the businesses are leaving here, they're going there, but guess what? The money's not going back to the school system. So Texas as a state is getting rich. Texas education, not really.
You know, last Friday, I had the privilege of being with Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg over at Silicon Valley with 20 CEOs in large, medium, small, startup. And going around the room, we asked what their priorities were. The number one priority, and this was probably about 2/3 of them, listed competitiveness. And they listed that as being competitive in taxes, competitive in regulations, competitive so they could actually grow jobs in California. And one of the largest CEOs there said, while it's easier for you to balance your budget with Prop 30, the recent tax increase, what that does to me is I'm losing engineers and computer programmers to Texas. And they're losing to other places. Now, we all, and one of the CEOs says, when you think, and he's addressed it to Darrell and me, when you think of California, what is it you're proud of? And both of us, part of the answer was Silicon Valley. There's no place we go in the United States or the world where we don't crow about Silicon Valley. We have 40% of the nation's venture capital that's attracted to California, most of that to Silicon Valley. We have 2 of the top 3 biomedical centers in the United States, San Diego, San Francisco. So we are a tech magnet and innovation center, but then they get the innovation and they expand elsewhere because of the cost of business. So this piggybacks on what was just being said. If we can broaden the base of the taxes, create jobs, you have more people paying taxes, we will have more revenue if we prioritize for education. The flip side of that is CEO Magazine just didn't say this in 2011. The last 8 years standing, they have said, we are the worst place in which to do business. And you can drill down and they'll start talking about where they choose to expand. We heard it firsthand from the CEOs last week. That's a real problem. As we're talking about and we're, I don't remember what the number is, we're the 48th or 49th in taxes, meaning we're the top 1 or 2 in, not one, I think New York or New Jersey is still higher than us, but we're one of the top 3. So what do we do with that money? I don't want to spend a lot of time, and I could spend a whole hour just talking about this, but the real issue is that we will never have enough money, but if we broaden the tax base so it wasn't just on the wealthy, there is a disconnect in our society. We want to punish those that are doing well. The flip side of that is business people, you gravitate to where you get rewarded for what you do and what you kick back. Just like the teachers. We want to reward the teachers that are doing a good job. I think there ought to be a higher compensation, a market, if you will, for if we're short on math and science teachers, give a premium for math and science teachers. Because then you'll find them coming in, just like you were talking about the principals. You had to pay more money to get superintendents or principals in to do the quality job you're doing. In education, we take a quality blind approach to our teachers. Our teachers become widgets, and they become more valuable the longer they sit in the chair. They become more valuable the more units they take. We do not even score them on how effective they are to educating the kids to the standards that we would like to see. So personally, I think if we showed the public that we valued teachers enough to grade them on how effective they were, at least a component of the effectiveness, and sorry I'm offending teachers out here, if we actually had that as a component of it, I think people would be willing to give more money to the system. There was a Stanford study a few years back that said education needs more money, but to put it into this system without reforming it would be a waste. And I think it's a chicken and an egg first, but you have to reform it first, and then you find the resources. In finding the resources, we can't put it on the top 1% who are already carrying 40% of our income tax load, and it's probably higher after this last tax increase, because they are leaving for other states. Our neighboring states, Arizona is less than half of our rate. Texas has 0. Florida has 0. It becomes too big of an issue for these guys, and so we keep loading it up on them because that's the easy thing to do, and they leave because they can. I often say there's nothing more portable than a millionaire and his money, and they're voting with their feet by moving out of the state. So that will hurt us long term unless we correct that. And then just lastly, my first year in education, I was on a committee, and we're having this presentation, and it's about education needs more money, which is pretty, we all know that's true. And so I asked the question of somebody that was making this presentation. I said, well, how much money is enough? And, well, $100 billion would be a good start. Now, mind you, at the time, our general fund budget was $100 billion. So there's no way we can devote our entire general fund budget when we're already one of the highest tax states in the nation and bring education out of that. But I think if we reform the tax structure, and that's not easy, and so that we're more competitive in creating jobs, and regulatory climate is part of that as well, and then we start rewarding excellent teachers, we start paying at a level that we can bring in quality teachers, I think we will have a system that is respecting teachers for what they contribute, but don't treat them like they're interchangeable widgets. And then we will have a quality, world-class educational system. My simplistic thinking. And by the way, I don't have a magic wand, so I can't make it happen. There is a question that says, please explain Parent Trigger and Parent Empowerment Act. And I know I referenced it, and I think another speaker referenced it. Since I was a joint author of that, I'll just say that quickly, that President Obama, when he came in, established Race to the Top. And because it's difficult to force people to do things, the government likes to use a carrot. And the carrot there was they would give us some hundreds of millions of dollars for states on a competitive basis that had certain different criteria that was deemed valuable by the federal government. So Race to the Top in California, this was a response to that. Senator Gloria Merrow and I were, she was chair of Senate Education, I was vice chair, and we authored the Parent Trigger Act, and we like to stay away from trigger because it has a bad connotation these days, so we prefer to call it empowerment. But basically, it's set up for some of the lowest performing schools in this state that parents, if they got petitions signed by 50% of the parents, could basically take over that school. And it gave them a menu of options of what they could do. They could get rid of the superintendent, they could, or the principal, they could make it a charter school. It gave them a whole list of things from simple to more complex. So 3 schools have actually done that now. There's one in Compton, one in Adelanto, and then this, I think it was 32nd Street, was that what it was, in LA Unified. But it's just a way for parents who feel trapped and they can't afford to put their kids in private school. They can't, not able to self-teach or homeschool, but they can take over their school and by that way negotiate. In the case of the last one, as I said, I had them in committee yesterday. They negotiated with LA Unified and also a charter, and they chose to go with LA Unified, but it was on like a contract basis. This is what we will do. This is what we will change. This is how we will help your child have a better educational experience. So I personally think it's a great deal. We'll see. I think 7 other states have copied this law and put it into practice, and we'll see how that plays out over time. We appreciate what you're doing. I think together we can make a difference in education in California. Thanks for your concern. Thanks for your attendance, and we'll see you next year.